Welcome back to First Chapter Fridays. I will be reading from #Murder Trending by Gretchen McNeil. And this is Chapter 1. The instant Dee Guerrera peeled open her eyelids and gazed around the dimly lit warehouse, she knew she was screwed. 50 million people are about to watch me die. She lay on the concrete floor, its chill permeating her clothes, and recalled the insanity that landed her here. 3 weeks ago, the most important things in her life had been college applications and securing a date to prom. Then the body, the trial, she'd hardly had time to process what was happening before she found herself sitting in a courtroom listening to a jury find her guilty of first-degree murder. Was that this morning? Yesterday? Dee tried to remember how much time had passed since the verdict, but her mind was fuzzy. Her breathing labored, as if she'd been drugged. The bailiff. As the judge read her sentence, she'd heard the bailiff come up behind her. She'd expected to be escorted back to her cell, but instead felt a hand on her wrist, a pinch in her arm. It must have been a needle. She'd been rendered unconscious before they hauled her off to Alcatraz 2.0. Alcatraz 2.0. She'd heard the judge say it, but she still could hardly believe it. The sentence was usually reserved for the most infamous of convicted killers. Mobsters, mass murderers, terrorists, assassins. They were notorious. They were dangerous. They got good ratings. Dee was just a 17-year-old nobody who couldn't even throw a punch, let alone stay alive long enough on Alcatraz 2.0 to gain a cult following. Yet here she was, about to be the star attraction on the #1 live streaming show in the country. Yay? Alcatraz 2.0, the suburban island in the San Francisco Bay Area, where convicted murderers were hunted down by government-sanctioned serial killers for Americans' amusement, had been the brainchild of an anonymous television mogul known only as the Postman. When a former reality star was elected president of the United States, the Postman had used his clout to sell the federal government on the idea of capital punishment as entertainment, broadcasting the over-the-top theatrics of the Postman's psychotic killers, each with their own thematic brand of murder. Not only reminded citizens of what awaited them if they broke the law, but it kept them glued to their screens, where they were less likely to break those laws in the first place. The Postman app had been a runaway success. Fans could watch 24/7, cycling through a range of live camera feeds from all over the island, inmates at home in their apartments, at work on Alcatraz 2.0's Main Street, and of course, the murders. A double doorbell notification alerted users of a kill in progress, which they could watch live or in a variety of replays on the app. Users spiked videos to show their appreciation, and before long, all the Postman's killers had their own fandoms, forums, merch, video games, RPGs, plus the lucrative betting markets, all controlled by Postman Enterprises Incorporated. Postman's killers were media-driven celebrities, just like the president, though they were faceless, masked. There were even conspiracy theory web series devoted to speculation about the killer's secret identities. Were the Hardy Girls actually minivan driving soccer moms? Didn't Gassy Al's voice sound like the announcer on The Price is Right? The whole thing was effing nuts. But while all of Dee's friends and even her stepsister, Monica, had been obsessed with the Postman, Dee refused to watch. In fact, just hearing the telltale ding dong notification triggered a full-on PTSD panic attack as Dee internalized the inmate's fear and instantly relived the 6 days she'd spent trapped in a white, windowless room by a deranged kidnapper when she was 11 years old. So yeah, Dee loathed everything about the Postman, even if technically it was justice served. That had been the main selling point of the Postman, justice. But was it really delivered? Dee's trial for Monica's murder had been a complete joke, from dubious DNA evidence to a psychiatrist who'd only interviewed Dee once, then testified that she suffered from a deep-seated jealousy of and hatred for her stepsister. Total bullcrap. But the jury didn't think so. When which had landed Dee in one of the postman's kill rooms. Dee had thought she'd get at least a few weeks to settle into her life on the island. Didn't most inmates hang around for a while until the audience became invested in their stories, personas, jobs, and intra-island relationships? Crap, Dee should have paid more attention when she'd had the chance. At least then she'd have some knowledge of what she was in for. Now she'd have to rely on what she'd learned from Monica or picked up during her trial when she'd been forced to watch a non-stop Alcatraz 2.0 feed in her prison cell. Well, she knew one thing for sure. One of the postman psychos was about to shed her blood. Who would it be? Would she end up as the main ingredient of one of Hannah Ball's cannibalistic casseroles? Or starring in Cecil B. DeViolent's splatter porn recreation of Gone with the Wind? Was Gucci Hangman at this very moment constructing a designer noose for her neck, expertly crafted to match her complexion and outfit and the latest trends from New York Fashion Week while it slowly strangled the life out of her? Or was Molly Mahler about to flood the room with water and piranhas and make her choose death by suffocation or mastication? With a heavy sigh, Dee pushed herself to her feet and took stock of her situation. She glanced down at her clothes and realized that her orange prison jumpsuit had been replaced by a floor-length ball gown of iridescent pale blue tulle and satin with a pair of clear lucite kitten heels on her feet. An outfit fit for a princess, which meant crap. She was about to be Prince Slicer's next victim. Slicer was the worst. Not only did he chase his victims through booby-trap-riddled mazes, but he made them dress up like cartoon princesses while he hunted them down and skewered them with an arsenal of increasingly large and bizarre cake knives. Dee spun around, looking for the mirror. Slicer always left one for his victims, to see what twisted fairy tale she was about to relive. The cracked pane was 10 feet away, hanging from her rusty nail on the wall. Blue dress, black choker, elbow-length gloves, matching sparkly headband, and her dark brown hair had been twisted up into a bun. Cinderella? A blonde housemaid. Seriously, he couldn't even pick a brunette? This sucks on so many levels. Slicer's last victim had been done up as Rapunzel, complete with an elaborately long wig that the poor girl kept tripping over as Slicer came in for the kill. Monica had been obsessed with her death, watching it over and over again as Rapunzel crawled away, pathetically begging for mercy. Immediately, #SlowCrawl trended on the Postman feed as millions of people critiqued Rapunzel's performance. What would Dee's death include? #exploding pumpkins? #killer mice? So freaking humiliating. Bad enough she was seconds away from getting a 12-inch blade through her sternum, but she had to trend as well. Still, Dee knew better than to fight back. There would be no escape, no appeal. There never was after an Alcatraz 2.0 sentence. And Dee didn't stand a chance against the Postman's killers. Even badass MMA fighter Nancy Wu only lasted 4 months. No, the most Dee could hope for was to put on a good show in her final moments. Maybe sell some merchandise from the Postman's e-store to help her dad and stepmom with the legal bills. So, best case scenario, t-shirts depicting her mangled corpse, a smartphone case sporting her skewered Cinderella silhouette, and the hashtag, "A death is a wish your heart makes." A shot glass shaped like a cracked glass slipper. The world is so messed up. Footsteps broke the silence of the warehouse, jarring Dee back to reality. It's starting. Glancing around, Dee saw that she was in a small chamber, walls on all 4 sides, lit by a single spare bulb suspended above her head. In each shadowy corner, a red dot of light indicated a live camera, filming her every move. And to either side, dark, narrow corridors snaked off in opposite directions. Slicer's footsteps were coming from her right, which meant she was supposed to run the other way, like a good, convicted killer. And then something snapped. Why should Dee be the victim here? The country wanted to see blood, but why did it have to be hers? Prince Slicer had brutally murdered dozens of people, which in Dee's mind made him more deserving of justice served. Besides, if she died, there would be no one left to find Monica's actual killer. That was something worth fighting for, wasn't it? Dee didn't run. She didn't flee blindly down the pitch-black hallway, stumbling toward whatever sadistic traps Slicer had laid for her. Instead, she grabbed the only thing she could use as a weapon, the mirror. She ripped it off the wall, the decrepit nail on which it had hung clanking to the concrete floor, and waited beneath the single suspended light bulb. A figure emerged from the corridor. Prince Slicer was dressed all in white. Crisp, straight-legged pants, shiny patent leather shoes, and a wide-shouldered coat bedecked with gold buttons and matching epaulettes. He was Cinderella's prince, just like the cartoon character Dee had loved growing up. But instead of a glass slipper, he gripped a nasty, serrated knife in his hand, and his face was obscured by an enormous pair of night vision goggles. Oh, so he'll be able to see in the pitch-black maze, but I won't. Coward. It seems so cheap, so ridiculously lopsided. A kitten versus a cheetah. Except that Dee had seen enough Hollywood blockbusters to know that this cheetah had a weakness. Prince Slicer stared at Dee from the shadows, head cocked to the side as if he was confused by her lack of abject panic. She wondered if he was worried about the ranking of this video. Good. Screw this guy. I'm not a toy. He flicked his head toward the opposite corridor, prompting Dee to run. But there was no way in hell she would plunge recklessly into the darkness. She shook her head defiantly from side to side. Prince Slicer sighed, epaulets sagging as his shoulders drooped. The body language reeked of irritation, though he never said a word. This time he pointed the blade at the hallway, like a parent punishing a child. Go to your room, now. Screw you, Dee said. That did it. Prince Slicer lowered his chin, his goggled eyes boring a hole right through her, and marched across the room. Dee barely had time to react. She took 2 steps back until the mirror was directly under the light. Then she angled it to reflect the overhead bulb and aimed the concentrated beam at Prince Slicer's night vision goggles. She heard him swear, and no one had ever heard Prince Slicer's voice before. Dee imagined that #SlicerSpeaks would be trending within seconds. But she didn't have time to ponder the newest mega hit hashtag. Slicer shielded his eyes with his arm and charged. Dee dodged just as he slashed at her face with the menacing blade, missing her by inches. She darted out of the way and kicked at the pristine white leg of his costume. He stumbled, and as Dee swung around, she cracked the mirror against the back of his head. Prince Slicer sprawled onto the floor, momentarily flailing his arms and legs, and then all was deathly still, except for the pooling blood beneath his body. Well, crap. That has been chapter 1 of #Murder Trending by Gretchen McNeil. You can get a copy from the Niles North Library.